Welcome on into Three Bold Takes. It's Chase, Freddie, and Quinn. Of course, we're continuing the series about 2024 and successful football seasons. This time we're turning to Go Tigers in LSU, Baton Rouge. Ed O is not the coach anymore. It's Brian Kelly, and he just lost a Heisman winning quarterback and two amazing receivers. So, Quinn, in 2024, what's going to make him successful?
Man, look, I think LSU needs to get back on the right track. I think year one was way too early success. That came off of kind of a surprise home upset over Alabama that got them into the SEC title game. Year two, I think they were about where I thought LSU would be. Now we're going into year three, and this is where I think some more serious expectations are going to befall LSU. The way I see things shaking out for them right now is I think there's a clear favorite in the SEC. And then I think there's a rung right below that with teams that are talented enough that they can manipulate their way into getting to the SEC title game. And LSU's one of those teams, along with Texas, Ole Miss, and Alabama. Like those four, I kind of have grouped all in one little pot. For me, a successful year for LSU is getting to the playoffs. I think that's where you want to be if you're the LSU Tigers in year three. I'm not saying win a playoff game. I'm not saying be the best team in the SEC. I think with the way their schedule shakes out, they get a lot of teams at favorable times in the year, and they get teams they want at home, which plays a huge factor in why I think LSU could finish this high. Because let's be real, the SEC is so deep that there are teams that I think are actually pretty talented who might go 8-4 or 7-5, despite how talented they are because of how hard the schedule is. One interesting thing, I want to end with this, because like I said, my expectations just make the playoff to have a successful year. How weird is it that they play USC and UCLA in the same season, both non-con? I think USC is a neutral site in Vegas, and then UCLA is a home game, which that's huge advantage LSU right there. Playing LSU in the swamps of Louisiana in mid-September doesn't sound like a good time for a team from Southern California. But yeah, make playoffs. That's my expectation for LSU.
I did not. I've been looking at their schedule probably for the past 10 minutes, and it had never occurred to me that they play USC and UCLA in the same year until you said something. I don't know why that just did not register in my brain. But you mentioned some things that I want to talk about, and that's all of their tough games are at home, right? Minus the Texas A&M. However, I think at that point in time, Texas A&M may already have 3 losses. If they caught them early in the year, it might be a little bit different. But you've got Ole Miss at home, top 10 team. You've got Alabama at home, a top 10 team. You've got Oklahoma at home, which could be top 15, top 20 team. Other than that, you play at Florida, at Arkansas, at South Carolina. Like that's tough. Don't get me wrong, but it's South Carolina, for Pete's sake. I mean, it's not like you're playing at Tennessee or anything like that. So that leads me to think that, yes, you should make the playoffs if you're LSU. I think 10-2 probably will get you in. Obviously, depending upon what happens at the rest of college football, but I think 10-2 would do it. But I also want to say one more thing about what would be successful. Obviously, Quinn, you mentioned they did beat Alabama at home 2 years ago in overtime. Now, every other super huge game that they've had since then, they got steamrolled by Georgia. I mean, they got beat by 20. It was a blowout in the first half, and then LSU started to bring it tight. You lost to Ole Miss last year. That was a tough loss there. That was a big game. You got beat by Alabama. That was another big game. So ever since that first win at home against Alabama, you have not been able to beat the upper echelon of college football teams, especially in the SEC. So I would look to you go 10-2, but you have to beat either Alabama or Ole Miss. Like those two teams are the toughest two on your schedule. So you've got to win one of those games and prove that that fluke 2 years ago was not indeed a fluke in overtime. And that gamble that Brian Kelly did to go for two was something that he would do again, which I know he would do again because he's Brian Kelly. But if they would have lost that game, it would have been total. I mean, the outlook on LSU this year would be totally different because you wouldn't have had that overachieving year one like you did because you did beat Alabama. So you've got to make the playoffs and you've got to beat at least either Alabama or Ole Miss at home.
Yeah, I've been trying to find it. I can't find it right now. But for me, I'm going to go opposite of you guys. I think it's an 8-win season. I think that's a huge one for me. And look at me crazy if you want to, but they were all offense last year. They were number one in points scored per game. I think they were top 20 in total offense. But where was their defense at? It was basically like their defense wasn't showing up on the field most games. And it's great. You can score and you can do all that offensively. And let's not get it twisted. College football is now an offensive game. Like that is what it is. And so if you can score and you can knock the lights out, you're going to win most ball games. If you can put up 30 to 45 points, you're going to win most ball games. But at the same point, let's look at who they lost. Jaden Daniels, a Heisman winner who accounted for, I believe, 50-60% of their statistics each game. And that's rushing and passing. And then you have Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., one of the best wide receiver duos in all of the nation, going to the draft as well. And you have a lot of your offensive pieces leaving, and I think they have a great guy coming in. Garrett Nussmeier is going to be a great quarterback coming in, but it's also replacing that production. Jaden Daniels had nearly 1,200 yards on the ground last year, and the next guy, your running back, your lead number one running back, had 600. So it's about replacing that production and having a 10-win season after bowl games in his first 2 years. I think an eight-win season should be doable, and the schedule is fairly easy. I mean, that should be fairly doable. I'm just not looking at LSU saying, "Hey, they're gonna be playoff material." I don't think they are by any means. And I think when they hit that, because they have it easy, the first few. I mean, USC could be but Nicholls, South Carolina, UCLA, and South Alabama should be a sweep. But then you run into Ole Miss. Then what kind of Arkansas do we see this year? Then you get Texas A&M, and then Alabama, then Florida. You know, that's a tough stretch where you could go 2-3, or you could go 4-1. You don't really know where you end up right there, and that's where it comes from me. Is the offense was the name of the game last year for them. If they supply a defense on the other side, yeah, they should beat the 8-win total. But both years, Brian Kelly has had a team. Their defense has not done much, and their offense has carried both the seasons for them to make them competitive. And now, without a Heisman-winning quarterback and all, I think it's going to be a bit of a down year.
Do you not feel, though, like an 8-win projection is low for LSU? Because, so for me, when you look at LSU football, I kind of don't judge them based off who their coach is. Ed Ogeron won a national title.
True.
And a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's so much talent in the New Orleans, Shreveport, Baton Rouge area.
Yeah.
That all grow up wanting to play at LSU. That they just will randomly stumble into having a super team just because there's that much talent in the area at any one given point in time. And as far as I know, you guys are not the biggest Brian Kelly fans in the world. In terms of actual success, though, measurable success, he's still a top 10 coach in college football in terms of what he's achieved on the field. Do you not think that saying only 8 wins is a little bit of a low expectation for that? Those two things combined.
Yeah, and I'm not. It does fill up because an LSU team is one of the toughest SEC teams there's ever been in our lifetime. At least for me. Every time it hits the first weekend or second weekend of November, and Alabama had to go play us LSU, I was scared to death, no matter where we were playing, in Tuscaloosa or in Baton Rouge. But when looking at this team, I just using the crutch of an offense, and I didn't agree with it, but everybody believing the superhuman that Jaden Daniels was as the crutch of your offense, I think that's setting them up for a little bit of failure this year in my eyes. Um, but I still think they're a tough team. I think they should exceed that mark, but I'm being very pessimistic when it comes to LSU this season.
I,
Um, just because I think they like that stretch I mentioned with Ole Miss, Arkansas, Texas A&M, Alabama, and all them. There's a shot that they could lose 3 games in that mix right there, and there's a shot they could go almost undefeated in that. And so it is a little low for me, but at the same point, I'm being pessimistic on them because saying that they have a playoff hope when I can't see that at all for them, not until I see a product on the field. Um, then I can't agree with that. So I'm gonna play it low. Freddie, you look like you had something else.
yeah, I just real quick here before we round it out. You mentioned that, obviously LSU relied on their offense last year, which they did. And that's uncharacteristic for two things. Obviously, LSU as a whole, where traditionally the defense has been what's been nasty at LSU. Even the Joe Burrow National Championship, when they had an amazing offense, their defense was still pretty raw. But also, Brian Kelly normally has a better defense than he does offense as a coach historically. So I would look to see the defense taking a step forward this upcoming year simply because of his past, especially at Notre Dame when, man, they could not find a quarterback that was worth a darn. And we're still saying that today where they're getting these transfers in. They still can't get a quarterback that's worth a darn. But their defense has always been good to win them some football games.
True. True. Anything else, fellas?
I think I'm good.
All right, guys. So we just discussed the 2024 successful season for LSU. For 3 bold takes, it's been Chase, it's been Freddie, and it's been Quinn. Thank you guys so much for watching, listening, and supporting us. Make sure to like, comment, share with your friends, and let us know what you have to say about LSU. For 3 bold takes, that's all.